Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Alex and today I'm going to be reviewing another Bob Dylan album for you. This is going to be the next installment in my Bob Dylan album review series. I think this is the 5th review I've done now, and it's actually Dylan's 6th album, but I didn't review his self-titled debut album for some reason. I'll probably go back and do that at another time. But yes, today I'm going to be reviewing his 6th studio album, which of course is Highway 61 Revisited. This is from 1965, of course. This is my my only vinyl pressing of the album, which is a reissue. I've also got the CD copy, or a CD copy. This is from the Mono recordings, which was released in about 2011. So I've got, this was Dylan's 6th studio album, released on August the 30th, 1965 on Columbia. The initial mixing was obviously done in mono. That was the mix that Dylan approved, but of course stereo pressings started to come out shortly after. So the album is named after the state highway that cuts through Central America, starting from Wyoming in the north, running all the way down to New Orleans in the south. And this was quite an evocative name for an album, considering the rich musical history that kind of is associated with all of the states that this highway runs through. The album's genesis was kind of born of the fact that Dylan became very dissatisfied with the music he was making and performing in early 1965. He went on the UK tour in March and April time 65, playing again solely acoustic music at this point. And even though he just released one of his most successful albums in Bring It All Back Home, he became pretty disillusioned with that style of music and just felt very uninspired upon returning from that UK tour. It would be the song Like a Rolling Stone that would reignite a fire in Dylan for songwriting. He credits as being a song that saved his career, essentially. Recording commenced on June the 15th and 16th of 1965, with Dylan enlisting Mike Bloomfield to play the guitar. And Mike Bloomfield was, by all accounts, an incredible guitarist, one of the best kind of in the New York scene at the time. And Dylan has repeatedly said that Bloomfield is one of the best guitarists, or the best guitarist he ever played with. So pretty high compliments from Dylan on that front. And Bloomfield really adds another dimension to this album in many, many ways. Of course, other musicians that played on the album: Paul Griffin on the piano and organ, Bobby Gregg on the drums, and Harvey Goldstein on the bass. Then of course we also have Al Kooper, who many of you will know the famous story about Al Kooper playing the organ on this album, and specifically on the song Like a Rolling Stone. He snuck into the recording studio without anybody noticing and took up a position at the organ and started playing on the track Like a Rolling Stone. Spotted by the producer Tom Wilson, and this is hilariously recounted in Martin Scorsese's No Direction Home documentary. Al Kooper credits Tom Wilson for allowing him to continue playing during the first few takes of the song, and eventually Dylan loved what Kooper was contributing to the song. Even though he wasn't playing in time, he was slightly behind the rhythm of the song, but Dylan liked the sound of the organ that Kooper was playing so much that he approved it as being on the final version. So after the first sessions were concluded in June, Dylan retreated to Woodstock to continue writing material for the album for another month or so, and he would then return for probably the most famous live performance in rock music history to that time, and that of course was the famous Going Electric show at the Newport Folk Festival at the end of July. And this was obviously a big moment for not just Dylan but the whole folk scene at the time, who previously held Dylan up as being a paragon of virtue. and suddenly he had come out and kind of broken their trust and betrayed them, or so they thought. So fresh off this experience at Woodstock, Dylan would return to the studio on July the 29th until August the 4th to conclude recording Highway 61, which was then released a few short weeks later. So that's just a bit of background about the recording and writing of this album. Now I'm going to take you through the track listing, and I'm going to go through just a bit of background on the songs, and also obviously give my opinion on them, and give you just my honest opinion on each song. So kicking off the album, we have Like a Rolling Stone, of course, potentially Dylan's most famous song, and certainly one of his favourite songs that he ever wrote. This is a nice quote from Dylan. He says, "It was originally 10 pages long, wasn't called anything, just a rhythm thing on paper, all about my steady hatred directed at some point that was honest." Bit of a mouthful of a quote there, but I think that perfectly surmises the mood of the song and, you know, the importance of it to Dylan after, as I mentioned, becoming a bit burnt out after the kind of early part of 1965. This was a song that really put fire back into his belly. He also said about this song that this was the song that made him realize he wanted to be a songwriter and not a poet, not a novelist or any other. He didn't want to do any other form of art. He knew once he wrote Like a Rolling Stone that he was a songwriter at his core. He also described it as a long piece of vomit, which I think is pretty funny. So what's my take on Like a Rolling Stone? I mean, it used to be potentially my favourite Dylan song a long time ago. I wouldn't put it up in my top 5 anymore, although I still love this song. I still think it's one of the best he wrote, and I can see why he was so attached to it in so many ways. I think I've overplayed it over the years, for sure. Like so many of Dylan's songs, I've heard them hundreds and hundreds of times, and that in itself kind of takes a bit of the sharpness away from them, takes a bit of the magic sometimes away from them. But it's one of those songs that I can hear it once in a blue moon nowadays, and it will just completely blow me away again. So yeah, this is a great song. The energy that he manages to maintain, him and the musicians manage to maintain for the whole 6-minute song is just extraordinary to me. You have to remember that at this time as well, pop songs and radio friendly songs were maximum of 3 minutes, and Like a Rolling Stone really shattered those notions of what a song could be, what a mainstream song could be in 1965. So yeah, it's I think it's very much the song that broke the 60s in half. People talk about the moment he went electric, and that's another moment that did the same thing. But I think Like a Rolling Stone, the sound of it, the lyrics, just kind of, they encapsulate and symbolize the kind of two halves of the 60s for me. So Like a Rolling Stone is just a masterpiece, and I can't say enough about it, to be honest. So the next song on the album is Tombstone Blues. This is a nice change of pace for the album. This is a song that is just full to the brim with imagery and stream of consciousness lyrics, with such a rhapsodic pace and such a fervent pace to it that it kind of speeds up the album, if that's possible from Like a Rolling Stone. It kind of adds even more acceleration to the album. I think this is probably the closest Dylan got to putting some of the more abstract and longer form streams of consciousness stuff that he was writing into a song format. He was writing a lot of kind of long form prose and poetry at the time, kind of beat poetry, some would say. There was a book that came out that he wrote around this time called Tarantula, which was essentially this very vivid, evocative poetry, and it is kind of nonsense stuff, but I think this song is the kind of closest he got to kind of putting that into a song, and it comes together really well. I think it's quite an underrated song. The melody and the guitar work from Bloomfield is sensational. He just provides such an energy to the track and and really gives it a momentum that I don't think it would have otherwise. And just this relentless pace with the guitar and the drums just adds to the song so much, and doesn't allow the lyrics to become bogged down, doesn't allow the lyrics to kind of overpower overpower everything. I think it adds a sense of balance to it, which is nice. So yeah, I think this is I think it's an underrated track. Certainly one of my favorites on the album, and yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. Next song is It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry, which is another change of pace on the album. The original version to this was much faster, much more upbeat, and you can hear that version. He played it at the Newport Folk Festival, this song, and you can certainly hear that different version that he actually recorded before recording the version that ended up on the album. And then, you know, in the album version he slows it down, adds this kind of bluesy quality to it, and I think it really benefits from that slowing down, because I think the album, if it had continued at such a pace, just would have caused a lot of people to kind of switch off in a certain way, or just become overwhelmed or something. So yeah, I like how this song kind of slows everything down, and the lyrics very evocative, very symbolic, but they're nothing too cacophonous and too much to handle, like perhaps they are on Tombstone Blues, where kind of everything is coming at you at once. One of the earlier versions was actually recorded with Eric Clapton playing on the session. Yeah, Clapton describes the sessions with Dylan as a kind of just a blues jamming session, which is pretty spot on, to be honest, when you hear those versions. Yeah, for me on this song, the lyrics kind of capture this kind of longing sensation, this longing mood, bit of melancholy in there, and just this kind of lonesome feeling of the narrator, who is kind of frustrated and kind of disillusioned by the world around him, kind of finding solace in the kind of simplicity of life around him by the end of the song. It's definitely grown on me over the years. I used to be slightly underwhelmed by it. So the next song is from a Buick 6. This song is a bit of a simpler moment on the album than the songs that perhaps had come before it. That's not necessarily a negative. I think, again, one of the qualities of this album is that it kind of does have these changes in pace without losing, you know, the continuity of the whole album. I do like this song. I think the melody is again very catchy, very nice on the ears. Again, some good guitar work on there, and I think everybody plays really well on this song. I also think Dylan's vocals are good on this one. I think he gives a really passionate delivery, which I can't say enough about. It's not as heady from a lyrical standpoint as, you know, the songs before it, and perhaps for that reason it's not quite as good as, you know, some of the other tracks on here. But nevertheless, I think it's a nice moment on the album. Moving on, we've got Ballad of a Thin Man, which is the end of the first side. Now, this is an interesting one for me, because many people would regard this song as a real high point on Highway 61. For me, this song has really lost a lot of its magic over the years. I think I've certainly overplayed it, as I said before, like I've overplayed so many Dylan tracks. This is one that definitely suffers in that category for me. But beyond that, I just don't really think the lyrics are as profound as perhaps some people do. Obviously the sentiment of the track is an interesting one, you know, kind of casting judgment on this kind of straight-edged, very square figure, perhaps a journalist, perhaps somebody in the media, or just some anonymous Mr. Jones, as he's called, who looks down upon freaks and people that are outside of the mainstream or outside of, you know, polite society. I think that's a really cool idea for a song, and I think the song is partially successful in that, in kind of using that theme and saying something interesting. But I don't know what it is about it. The more I've listened to it, the less I get from the lyrics, and I think that's not necessarily me saying the song sucks. I just think it just doesn't hit the mark for me in many regards. I also think the album version is not the best version. I much prefer the live versions from 1966 when he's playing it live during those shows. I think it just has this real pummeling energy to it, and this kind of, again, he shouts the lyrics into the microphone that it's really hard hitting for the most part. I just think it suffers a bit on the album version. I don't think his voice is quite up to scratch, and I don't know what it is about the album version. I'm just not really a fan of it anymore. So yeah, this is a funny one. I just fallen out of love with it slightly. But the live '66 versions are very, very good. So yeah, that's Ballad of a Thin Man. Okay, kicking off the second side of the album, we've got Queen Jane Approximately, which is another pretty comical name for a song. Yes, this song is another pretty biting moment on the album in terms of lyrics. Dylan obviously taking aim at somebody in this song, and I think it kind of juxtaposes quite nicely with the melody, which is quite bright and quite upbeat in many ways. And I do think the musicians all play their part on this song very well. Although allegedly Dylan's guitar was actually out of tune during the recording of this song. I don't play music myself, so I can't hear that, but that's probably the case. I've definitely read that somewhere. So yeah, I'm a fan of it. I don't think it's one of the best moments on the album, but that being said, I think it adds another change of pace and just a nice transition between the kind of the first side and the last few tracks on the album, which again get into more deeper territory, I would say. So yeah, it's a nice moment. Next up, we have Highway 61 Revisited, the title track. This was very typical of the stuff that he'd been writing again at this time, where he would kind of construct these worlds and kind of place in them these characters and these allusions, and especially in this song, allusions to kind of biblical figures, as well as kind of archetypal figures from American history and phrases here and there, popular phrases, and then he would just kind of subvert them and kind of subvert those tropes and subvert those characters and put them into kind of weird contexts. I think it works well on this song. It's probably the most notable thing about this track is the siren that Dylan plays. He plays a siren whistle, which is an interesting choice, and I think it actually comes off really well. Adds again another flavour to the song. I just think it's a fun listen. You can tell the band are having a lot of fun playing this, and yeah, I think everybody plays well, and it reminds me of 115th Dream from Bring It All Back Home, in just how much fun everybody's having just jamming on this song. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean everything. It's not one of Dylan's most profound songs, I would say, although the lyrics are deeper than people give it credit for. It's not a song that I would choose to play, every day of the week, but again, in the context of the album, I think it works nicely. So yeah, it's a decent song. Okay, so last two tracks, we've got Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, the penultimate track on the album. I think this song actually contains some of his most hard-hitting lyrics. It's actually one of my favourite Dylan tracks, and it's become more of a favourite over the years as I've heard it more. Again, I have to go back to the 1966 live performances of Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, because I just think they're some of the most just powerful live performances of any song I've ever witnessed. The way he delivers this song live is just, at that time, was just absolutely incredible to me. So yeah, those are that's kind of what made me fall in love with the song initially. But even the album version, I think the album version is beautifully recorded. I think the pacing of it is perfect. Dylan enunciates, pretty much every line perfectly. So yeah, the last verse of this song, where he starts it out by saying, I started out on Burgundy but soon hit the harder stuff. Something about that line I directly associate with the '66 tour, and perhaps it's because again, as I said, I love it so much in the live version of '66 from '66. But something about that line I just find it really impactful for some reason. It's not particularly profound line in any way, but I just think it's just really, really well placed, I think, within this song, in just capturing this mood of paranoia and kind of impending chaos that was kind of, you know, affecting Dylan in a very real way at this time. The walls were slowly closing in during the '66 tour, and I think even to him, he was starting to realise that, you know, eventually things were going to have to come to a crescendo. So that line to me has always kind of summed that up in a really, really powerful way. Yeah, this is a great song. I love the album version. I love the live version even more. And yeah, I just think it's a great moment on the album. All right, so we're at the final track, and everybody knows it. Everybody loves it pretty much. Of course, it is Desolation Row. This is a fascinating track, and what's interesting about this track, just a bit of background, is that when he started playing this live in the kind of fall or autumn of '65, people actually started laughing. People found this a funny song. They found a kind of comedic angle to see it from, and steadily as he started to play it more, and certainly as he got into the '66 shows, it eventually became to be seen as a more serious, more, you know, more sincere track. Yeah, it's just funny how the song kind of took that evolution over time. The track is obviously 10 or 11 minutes, I think, so his longest track to this point. Obviously the Sad-Eyed Lady that came in '66 was slightly longer, I believe. But at various times this has been probably my favourite Dylan track, or certainly my top 3 or 4 Dylan tracks. Maybe not, I don't think it's ever been my favourite actually, but it's been up there. In a certain way I've overplayed this one as well, but I just think it, you know, it's just such a classic. It has this dreamy quality to it, similar to Sad-Eyed Lady. The way the verses just kind of roll into one another, and it has a great sense of rhythm and pace to it, that allow it to kind of, you know, not outstay its welcome, because obviously you would think that an 11-minute track would kind of massively outstay its welcome and just become boring to listen to. But I think in the case of this and Sad-Eyed Lady, Dylan found a way of writing lyrics that were just, you know, so packed full of imagery and story and narrative that they never become tedious to listen to. So yeah, I think this was ultimately the kind of culmination of this period in Dylan's career, and I don't think he ever wrote another track quite like Desolation Row again. Yeah, just an incredible track in terms of scope and symbolism. You know, the symbolism is obviously heavy in this one, but then again you can see it from a number of angles. You can certainly listen to the track and take it literally, or you can take it metaphorically. Like so much of Dylan, it's you know, it's unclear as to what the meaning of it is. I think you can kind of draw your own meaning from it, which is what's so great about his music. So yes, Desolation Row, one of the best on the album, and the perfect closer pretty much. So my closing thoughts on Highway 61 revisited. Obviously this is a masterpiece, a classic. For me, I think I don't give it as much credit as perhaps some other Dylan fans do, and other music critics, you know, throughout the years. I know many people rate this as his, you know, his greatest achievement, his best album of all time, or some people think it's the best album of all time. I don't think it's anywhere near the best album of all time, and I don't think it's anywhere near his best album, to be honest. I think I would put this 5th or 6th. It would maybe just about get into the top 5 if I was ranking my favourite Dylan albums now. That being said, I mean, that's just a credit to his genius, to Dylan's genius, and just the sheer number of great albums he's released over the years. My reasons for not liking it as much as some others are perhaps that I just don't think it quite has the same enjoyability for me, and perhaps not the same variability as an album like Bringing It All Back Home or Blonde on Blonde. I just think those albums have more to offer and have a more eclectic mix of tracks than this one does. I also don't think it was quite as much of a giant leap forward as Bring It All Back Home was. Obviously it was still a move forward, and it's, you know, this was pretty much a continuation of the sound that he started to find on Bring It All Back Home. But I don't think it's, you know, as much of a momentous leap forward as, you know, some of his other albums. But it does include some of his best songs, there's no doubt about that. I mean, Like a Rolling Stone, Desolation Row, and even like songs like Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, as I mentioned. Amazing tracks, and I don't think there's really a weak moment on the album. And I know I mentioned in my Bring It All Back Home review that there were a couple of weaker moments on that album. So I guess you could say it's slightly more consistent, but I just, from a personal point of view, I just don't enjoy listening to it as much as either Bring It All Back Home or Blonde on Blonde. But, you know, that's a tough school to be a part of. In terms of just the sound of the album, I think it has a very tight, crisp sound to it, and I think that makes it distinct from the other two mid-60s albums. I think Blonde on Blonde is looser and muddier in certain ways, and I think Bring It All Back Home is obviously more acoustic and more, you know, has different influences to the sound of that one. So this album has a very distinct sound, and I think that's brought to bear by both Mike Bloomfield, Al Cooper, and basically all the session musicians that played on this album. And I just think they all do a spectacular job of coming together as one unit and just producing this sound that pretty much hadn't been heard before in the genre. So yeah, big props to everybody who played on this. So yeah, that pretty much concludes my thoughts on Highway 61. I'm keen to hear what you guys think of this album. I'd like to know if you like this as much or more as the other mid-60s albums, or, you know, comparing it, kind of ranking it in terms of Dylan's other albums. I think it's always interesting to hear everyone else's takes, but those are my thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed this review. I will try and record the next review within weeks as opposed to months like it has been between this one and the last one I did. But yeah, the next one will obviously be a big one because it's Blonde on Blonde, so that could be a long one to say the least. But yeah, thank you for watching this review. I've enjoyed talking about this album, and if you don't know, I recorded a video 2 days ago as well showing my Beatles vinyl, so if you haven't checked that out, then that's on the channel if you're interested. In the meantime, I hope everybody's doing well, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Alright, thanks for watching.